Guys, welcome back to my channel. My name is Monette, and this is my channel, Evolve with Monette. For those of you that are new here, I am a professional intuitive empath, and we're going to get into chapter 5 of David Deida's book, and it is called Intimate Communion. Chapter 5. So, just to catch you up, because it's been a week or so since we've done our last reading, and my angel specifically, in a reading that I was watching tonight, reminded me that I needed to continue reading because I was literally going to be like, oh, well, because, I pay attention to engagement and all the rest of it. And I thought, what is the deal here? And my angel said, it doesn't matter what the deal is. We said we wanted you to finish it. Y'all, when I tell you my angels talk to me, they talk to me and they do it very directly. So they said that they wanted me to continue this. They gave me an assignment to finish this before Venus retrograde was over. That gives us the next few days. Technically, we go, or before the month was over, really, but technically we go direct, not direct, but we come out. The last day of Venus retrograde is January 29th. Today is the 27th. We're on chapter 5. This book has 12 chapters. So that means that you might hear my voice a lot in the next few days because they said we asked you to finish something, and they said we asked you to sow a seed, we asked you to do something. Sometimes the spiritual message here is that sometimes we'll be asked to do stuff that we don't even understand why, and it's like, no one, it doesn't matter, guys, like, why do you guys want me to do this? And they said, we want you to do it, and in the obedience there's a payoff later. And I imagine that even if there's not one that I can tangibly calculate, they asked me to have a work ethic and a follow through. So here we are, and we begin with chapter 5. I will let you know this one's going to be a long one, so if you're just popping in, go grab something to drink, go grab something. I mean, it's pretty late where I am. I don't know if you're a snacker late at night, but if you are, do that too. If you're a smoker, do that too. If you want a glass of wine, do that too. And we shall settle in. Chapter 5, the 3 stages of intimacy. I have been in a really high vibration too, just a quick PSA, and I've noticed that my lives have had verbally interferences, paranormal and energetic interferences. I am a slider. For those of you that guys that don't know, just search what is a slider. You'll see lots of videos on YouTube, and I've even made one too. It means that my energy field, because of the way that I channel, interrupts electromagnetic fields and things like that. So I have been vibrating really high and feeling pretty fantastic lately, but that means that I've noticed a lot of cutouts on my streaming. We're going to go back to some face to faces here very soon where I pre record so I can control some of that, I hope. But what do I know? Let's begin. The 3 stages of intimacy. 4. What stage are you ready? How do you respond to the extreme expressions of masculine and feminine energy? Your response to the exaggerated play of sexual polarity can give you a clue to the stage of relationship for which you are almost ready. Imagine you happen to discover a videotape beneath a tree while walking through the woods. Curious about it, you bring it home and pop it into your VCR. Now, this is hilarious. This was written in the 90s, guys. So he's dated himself there with the VCR. Pardon me. He's dated himself there with the VCR, which is so funny to me. All right. Let me turn on my fan and get settled in. We're going to be here for a while. They said, I'm only doing 1 chapter tonight, angels. They're like, yeah, that's fine. Get it done before we told you to. Anyway, there on screen are a naked man and a woman having sex beneath the very tree under which you found the videotape. You feel strange about watching it. The woman makes a high-pitched screaming sound. The man pulls back her head by her hair, exposing her neck, which he licks and kisses. The woman seems to be struggling. Or is she writhing in ecstasy? Just then, your child walks into the room, so you quickly turn off the TV to remove the videotape. You think about what you've just witnessed for the rest of the day. Were you watching a videotape assault, or was it a passionate couple at the peak of sexual rapture? That night, as you're lying in bed trying to sleep, the images of the videotape sex scene dance through your head. Part of you may want to make love in such an abandoned and passionate fashion. Another part of you may be queasy, wondering if the passion was actually forced against the woman's will, or was it just a couple's ravishing sexual play with one another. You decide to watch the rest of the tape in the morning and then either show it to your intimate partner in the hopes that it will evoke deeply passionate lovemaking between you, or show it to the police so they can get started on the case. You wake up in the morning, and as soon as you're alone in the house, you pop the videotape back into the VCR and turn on the TV. The woman seems to be resisting, but it's hard to tell. Suddenly, her back arches and a long moan slides from her throat. She begins to claw the man's back, her fingernails digging deeply into his skin and muscles, dragging and scratching their way down to his buttocks. He kisses her neck, her breast, her nipples, at first gently nipping and then biting, and the videotape ends. How do you respond to this videotape? Depends on the stage of intimacy for which you are ready. So let me read that again. How you respond to what I've just read and to this imaginary videotape depends on the stage of intimacy for which you are ready. And that brings us back to the title of the chapter, The Three Stages of Intimacy. By understanding the three styles of intimacy and understanding the current style of intimate relationship, you can understand the next step you need to take. Which of the three styles is the most like your current recent relationship? Dependence, 50-50, or intimate communion? For those of you that are just seeing this today and have not done the other few chapters, all of these are explained in chapters 1, 2, 3, and 4 that are previously read and here on my channel. Please refer back. Each of these three styles is also a stage you can grow through if you're willing to be lovingly humorous about your own patterns in intimacy. Dependence relationship. Men are men and women are women. In the imaginary video, you were viewing the man and the woman in the abandoned throes of sexual ecstasy, or was the man subjugating, biting, and penetrating the woman against her will? In a dependence relationship, sex and power are often painfully mixed up. Partners often confuse some version of master-slave relationship with real love. I'm going to pause there because we see this not just sexually play out, but we see it where people are in toxic relationships where they think that if their partner isn't abusive, that they don't love them, or the partner that is abusive justifies their abuse as real love. So that's a little message for any of you guys that have ever been in that situation. I know that I have. All right. So let's take a deeper look here. They they are engaged in some kind of power play. In a dependence relationship, one partner often feels a need to be in control, while the other partner gives up his or her authentic power in order to feel loved and accepted. This is those codependent relationships that we see. A dependence relationship involves a partner who becomes dependent on each other, or the partners that become dependent on each other for money, emotional support, drugs, parenting, liquor, sex. And although the sex is sometimes good in this style of relationship, and guys, can we talk about that? How many of us have known people that have been absolute gutter trash regarding relationships, but maybe they were fantastic in bed? And we might have stayed a little bit longer than we should have because that we equated with being accepted because that was the short stick which we were measuring real intimacy. I know I counsel a lot of people that have dealt with it. I know I have at a couple points in my life also dealt with it too. Pardon me, guys. I'm makeup wiping as we speak. End of a day. All right, so let's talk about that. So although the sex may be sometimes good, especially during the making up period after a fight, we all know about makeup sex, partners often end up feeling limited by old style gender roles or by an imbalance of financial or physical power. Therefore, they attempt to transition to the next style of relationship. To do so, they learn to build personal boundaries and take care of themselves rather than always catering to the needs of their partners. Number 2, the 50-50 relationship. Safe boundaries and equal expectations for men and women. Partners in a 50-50 style relationship want to feel safe. So the videotape might seem harsh and violent to them or to you if that's the relationship that you're in. On the surface, they might seem completely turned off and react as if any form of forceful, passionate sexual ravishment is an act of SA. I can't say that word on YouTube. He writes the R word here, but I can't say it on YouTube. Deep down, however, they might be wistfully turned on, reminded of the depth of sexual loving that may be missing from their safe but lukewarm love life. The 50-50 relationship is the modern style of relationship that is based on two people coming together and working out an equitable partnership. Each partner is expected to shoulder half the responsibilities, more or less, right down the middle. Both of them have their own source of income, and together they negotiate a 50-50 plan to divide household duties. parenting, and financial obligations. To accomplish this, they attempt to strike their own inner balance between masculine and feminine qualities both at home and in the workplace. However, as many of us have discovered, there is a potential problem with this ideal of 50-50 relationship. We begin to lose our aliveness. Sexuality loses its passion. Our inner fire begins to fade away and we feel incompleteness at our center. Why? Because many of us have a sexual essence that's naturally more masculine or feminine that it is equally balanced or neutral. Thus, a side effect of this effort awarded 50-50 is the suppression or starvation of our naturally more masculine or feminine sexual essence. For some of us, cooperative partnership that emphasizes communication and shared responsibilities is sufficient. Others in this situation eventually suffer a feeling of incompleteness and develop a yearning to touch and be touched far more deeply and more passionately, both sexually and spiritually, than the 50-50 a relationship often allows. Number three, the third style, intimate communion. I relax into oneness and spontaneously give my deepest gift. If we've grown beyond a 50-50 relationship, we're no longer cautious about giving our love to our intimate partner. At a certain moment, we might beg and whimper, and at other moments, we might aggressively ravish our partner in love. Still, at other times, our loving is serene and sweet. But whether shouting, screaming, pleading, pushing, pulling, biting, or hugging, we are gifting our partner with uninhibited and free love flowing directly from our sexual essence without fear or doubt. If we have grown into the practice of intimate communion, the imaginary videotape does not pose a dilemma since we understand that the fundamental difference between the SA and the ravishment is simple. Love. That's the difference. Is love the motive of every squeeze, shriek, and nibble, regardless of how forceful, aggressive, or passionate? Or is the motive of need the need for sex, the need for power, or the need for control? Most important, in the practice of intimate communion, we learn that love is something you do, not something you fall into or out of. Y'all, that's the whole message right there. If you want a good marriage, you have to understand that very fact. You will not always feel yummy, yummy in your tummy, butterflies. A flight, and afternoon delights and skyrockets in flight. You will not feel like a rocket man. You will not want to come back down to earth again. You will feel like it's like drudgery sometimes, or you'll feel like it's normal and plain. And then some days you'll be so grateful that it'll make you just happy. You'll just be happy, but you are not always. I've done it before, Anita Baker. You're not always caught up in the rapture of love. There are rapturous moments, but a good relationship is something you practice at, and that's the truth in all capacities, whether it's your friendships or your lovers too. All right, let's go back. You do not fall into Natsu. Love is something you practice, like playing tennis or the violin, not something you happen to feel or not. If you're waiting to feel love in passionate sex or safe conversation, you're making a mistake. Love is an action, it's a verb, it's what you do. And when you do it, you feel it. When you are loving others, you find lovable. Love is an action you can practice. Therefore, intimate communion, when we practice loving, even when we feel hurt, rejected, or resistant, first we practice love, and then our native sexual essence blooms naturally, inevitably, because we are learning to give from our core, which includes the roots of our sexuality. The story of Paul and Leah. Paul and Leah represent thousands of couples that this writer has worked with who have, in their unique ways, grown through three stages of intimate relationship. This process is universal, though the details are never exactly the same. Paul and Leah are good examples of two people who were once dependent upon each other and therefore trapped in the conventional roles of good husband and good wife. Over time, they learned to grow beyond those roles of dependence into healthy wholeness of independence of a 50-50 relationship, but their journey did not end there. Stage one, dependence relationship. Most of us are very familiar with this kind of relationship, either in our own lives or the lives of our friends and parents. What does a dependence relationship look like for Paul and Leah? Still single, Paul wants to make money and have a family and be with a woman who looks good to him. Leah wants to find a man she could depend on, a man she could have a family with, and someone who would give her affection and take care of her. Paul and Leah meet and get married. Sometimes it's great. Sometimes they fight. Sex starts off fresh and spontaneous and eventually tapers down to a routine. Leah's afraid of losing Paul because she's emotionally and financially dependent on him. Paul's afraid of losing Leah because he's emotionally dependent on her, and he also depends on her to take care of their children and their home. Over time, Paul feels more and more burdened and trapped. Leah feels more and more unloved and unfulfilled in her life. For the sake of the children, they wait as long as they can, but they eventually divorce. Stage 2, the 50-50 relationship. It takes a while to start life over after divorce, but finally Leah feels her independence growing. She begins to discover her undeveloped talents and then becomes established in a career. She feels stronger and stronger. Her circles of friends grows, both men and women. She knows she'll never be in a dependence relationship with a man again. She develops financially as well as intellectually, reading the newest books on psychology, the arts, and the new partnership. She is her own self-actualized woman. Paul feels the loss at first, but eventually recovers. He resounds in his new freedom. He dates younger women, buys the things he always wanted to but never could before, and begins looking after himself in new ways. He goes to the spa and works out regularly. He finds himself enjoying long walks on the beach by himself, and he even makes it to a men's workshop, singing and banging drums and freely expressing his grief with other men as he's never done before. He's never felt so whole and balanced. Leah and Paul try several short and medium term relationships. They have a good time with their new partners, sharing interesting conversations and philosophical outlooks, but nothing really seems to click for either of them. They both have many just friends of the opposite sex. Once they have enough money and friends, they switch from getting more to getting better. Since their children are somewhat older and able to take care of themselves, Leah joins a women's group and attends weekly yoga classes, and even takes out the oil paint she put away when the kids were younger and demanded all her attention. Paul becomes an environmental activist, joins a Tai Chi class, and works towards writing the novel he always wanted to write but couldn't because of his family obligations. In the past, when Paul and Leah were in the dependence relationship together, Paul's certainty expressed itself as always needing to be right about everything. Leah could never express any disagreement with Paul becoming outraged or without Paul becoming outraged. He didn't want to listen to her ideas. In fact, if she came up with a good idea, he would somehow make it his own. After they were divorced, Paul began to realize how he was unfairly rigid and suppressive of Leah. He began to soften. He learned to listen. As a man ready for a 50-50 relationship, Paul learned to give and take with the new woman he met in his life. He became truly committed to achieving a 50-50 relationship. By spending time in nature and learning to contact his previously hidden emotions, Paul cultivated his underdeveloped feminine energy. Paul and Leah eventually find new intimate partners. In the new relationships, they retain their own bank accounts and create a joint account to share with their new partners who are also financially stable, more or less. They trade off cooking every other day. Even their vacations are based on equality. One vacation chosen by one partner, the next by another. They have each achieved 50-50 relationships with their new partners. However, as we have seen, only people with neutral sexual essences will be fulfilled and satisfied when they achieve a 50-50 relationship. For instance, no man with a strong masculine sexual essence will be fulfilled by committing himself to form a 50-50 relationship once and for all. This is because in emotional and sexual intimacy, the core of the masculine sexual essence is completed and fulfilled only by a partner who gives gifts of feminine love, not the more sexually neutral love of a 50-50 relationship. So even though Paul says he's committed to his 50-50 relationship, his partner can feel his inner uncertainty. Paul seems not only cautious about dominating his new partner's life, but also unwilling to enter her life very deeply at all with full commitment. His uncertainty prevents her from relaxing fully in the trustable persuasiveness of the stable and passionate masculine loving. She never feels fully satisfied, stuck in behavioral ideals of 50-50. Paul is safe, but he's also relationally weak, unwilling to plant the staff of his commitment and stand the ground of his love. Paul is willing to split the power of the relationship in a 50-50 fashion, but his passion is likewise split. He has become indecisive and unclear about the whole of his life and his direction, as many of today's men have also succumbed to. His energy for relationships seems to be somewhat contained with inner conflicts. His ability to give love is weakened by his own unclarity. He has lost touch with his sexual essence and therefore is unsure about anything, including his love for his new partner. And she can feel it. With her new partner, Leah is experiencing her own version of a 50-50 relationship. In her old dependence relationship with Paul, Leah found herself surrendering to his needs. Over time, she lost touch with her own real desires and instead catered to Paul's choices and wants. Hoping to feel his love, Leah lost her healthy boundaries and independent sense of self and became Paul's woman instead of her own woman. After they were divorced, Leah decided that she would not lose herself again. She would no longer be weak, unable, or unwilling to stand up for what she really wanted. So Leah practiced strengthening her boundaries. She learned to say no when necessary. She learned to speak what was on her mind. No longer afraid of her man's reaction, she learned how to stand up for herself. She became whole into herself, no longer a pushover. And her new men friends seemed to appreciate her strength and independence. Her new intimate partner appears to like the fact that she's so committed to true 50-50 relationships, rather than being a needy or dependent woman. Leah has made it quite clear that she doesn't need a man, but she is certainly interested in a loving partnership between two whole and independent people. But her new partner doesn't really seem to be the right man. And in fact, none of the men that she meets seem to. No man really seems willing and strong enough to match her. Her deep core, her feminine sexual essence remains unsatisfied by her new partner and by the men she's dated before him. If she had a more neutral sexual essence, then she would be satisfied by a more 50-50 man, a man who wanted to make her half the money and now, wanted her, a man who wanted her to make half the money and mow the lawn half the time, a man who wanted to calmly discuss everything as good friends rather than express his passionate, masculine desire for her as a woman. Because she has emphasized building her personal boundaries, she attracts men who likewise are more interested in establishing clear boundaries than dissolving in the ecstasy of a boundaryless, intimate communion. Because she wants the space to animate her well developed masculine energy, she attracts men who want to give her space rather than enter her and deeply touch her core heart desires. That is, she tends to attract safe men. Just as Paul has temporarily lost touch with the native desires of his masculine sexual essence, becoming indecisive and noncommittal in the process, Leah has lost touch with the native desires of her feminine sexual essence. She feels like the core of her womanhood is withering from the lack of deep loving. In a well-intentioned effort to grow beyond the rigid sex roles of dependence relationship, Paul and Leah each temporarily emphasize developing the energy opposite of their native sexual essence. That is to say, that Leah is actually feminine and Paul is actually masculine. Paul temporarily neglects the inherent needs for the strong life direction and vision that his masculine and sexual essence would naturally demand, and instead he develops his feminine energy of sensitive listening and cooperative sharing. Thus, he attracts women who unconsciously want to be with a man who has a relatively weak sense of direction. These women have plenty of their own direction and are attracted to the space that Paul gives them. Leah temporarily neglects the inherent needs for deeply and passionately shared love that her feminine sexual essence would naturally demand, and instead she develops her masculine energy of life direction and vision. Thus, she attracts men who unconsciously want to be with a woman who has relatively a weak desire for profound and passionate unions. These men seem to be in union with themselves and are attracted to the direction in Leah's life since they lack their own. Paul and Leah each have fun with their new partners, but deep inside they wonder, is this it? They feel pretty good for the most part, but are beginning to experience a sense of emotional and sexual unfulfillment. Paul is happy that his new partner has her own direction and doesn't depend on him, but sometimes he wants to feel her soften, relax, and to her independent stance open to him and really surrender into love. Paul begins to feel that his partner is more concerned with being right and equal to him than playing together in the depths of passion and trust. Paul wants to dance with a goddess, but feels he spends, more time jousting with a warrior. He starts to be attracted to women who are more unabashedly feminine than his partner, and their relationship finally breaks apart. Leah is quite happy that her new partner gives her emotional support and safe, nurturing affection. But sometimes she wants to feel him take a strong hand or a strong stand to express his masculine side, to move in the world with confidence and success, and to playfully ravish her with full presence and undividedly passionate loving. Leah expresses her needs to her new partner, but he feels criticized and hurt and responds by becoming even weaker in his presence. But he feels criticized and hurt and responds by becoming even weaker in his presence. Commitment and surety of love. Both partners are unsatisfied, but they hang on hoping something will change. Stage 3, intimate communion. One night, Leah gets a little drunk and really lets go. She has the best sex she's ever had. She totally abandons herself into the lovemaking and feels her boundaries expand to infinity as her heart and body dissolve into wave after wave of intense loving. She later wonders why she doesn't feel always this way during lovemaking and why it took alcohol. During a yoga class one day, Leah feels currents of energy moving through her body, filling her with a delicious flow of grace, love, and openness that reminds her of her recent sexual energy. Guys, just as a side message, that's Kundalini energy rising. Kundalini rising. Overwhelmed by the new sense of body surrender, she wants to explore these new feelings of deep and profoundly passionate and sacred sexuality. Leah can no longer settle for the sensitive but lackluster man whom she's currently with. She wants to open the depths of her heart with a man who's willing to fully present and fully present and, okay, let's see. Guys, I'm reading this to you guys in a Venus and a Mercury retrograde. Words. She wants to open the depths of her heart with a man who is willing to be fully present and committed in his intention. A man who is trustworthy and also strong enough to sweep her off her feet. Leah realizes that she wants a man who is not afraid to persist in his loving, to enter deeply into her heart and embrace the gift of her radiant and vulnerable goddesshood as well as her equality and personhood. Leah enters a new period in her life wherein she is continually open and moved by the immense power of love that flows through her heart and body. Around the same time, Paul's older brother, whom Paul always has looked for advice, dies. Paul feels like the carpet has been pulled out from under him. He wakes up and realizes he doesn't like his job, doesn't have any really close friends, and is getting older. He feels like he hasn't given his gift to the world, and he isn't so sure what that gift would be, since he has spent so much time absorbed in his job and relationships. Paul goes through a period of intense self investigation involving private therapy, group work, and contemplative solitude. He seeks out knowledgeable teachers and cultivates friendships with older men, discovering their deep truth. After a lot of hard work, he starts to understand himself. He begins to face himself directly without flinching. He dives deep into his unprotected heart, discovering his essential desires. He commits himself to living on the basis of his deepest truths. He begins a whole new way of life. Every day becomes a day of purpose, clarity, and humor for Paul. After all, once you see all of yourself, it's hard to take yourself over so seriously. Yes, it's hard to take yourself overly seriously, excuse me. Paul no longer settles for a woman who is satisfied. If he does the dishes on Monday, Wednesday, Friday, he wants to be free and live at the edge. He wants to find a partner who is willing to risk comfort for infinity. Wow, that's powerful. Willing to risk comfort. Are you willing to risk your comfort for infinity? Come on, somebody out there. I hope somebody's willing to do that. One day, Paul and Leah happened to run into each other, or did the universe orchestrate it? I put that in there about the universe. Before they exchange any words at all, she can feel his change. Like most women, Leah is extremely sensitive to the relative fullness of a man's masculine sexual essence. Paul's energy is strong, and his presence is full. He looks directly to her into her eyes, and she can feel he is at peace with himself, relaxed and confident, not divided inside. His mere presence feels like a blessing to Leah, like a breath of fresh, clean air. His smile is unencumbered by unfinished business and loose ends. He's not elsewhere inside his head or dwelling in the past. He's present with her, and through his presence, she can feel the fullness of his heart, the way he moves, the tone of his voice, the way he touches her shoulder. They are all pervaded by confident love. His presence and love are like the keys that unlock Leah's heart, and she naturally opens to him without fear because she trusts him as a full man. Leah and Paul begin seeing each other again. Over time, Leah continues to witness Paul's steady loving, his persistent care, his unwavering integrity. Certainly, there are moments when Paul does something stupid, but he's the first to laugh at himself, correct his ways, and continue with life as guided by a tangible sense of strong purpose, humor, and compassion. Paul has reclaimed his sexual essence. He can now love Leah with an undivided heart. In a dependence relationship, Paul's love was limited to his need to be right. In a 50-50 relationship, he was crippled by his compromised sexual essence, leading to self-doubt and inability to commit in love. He saw intimacy in which he could get away with being weak. He would rather give a woman her own space than stand his ground in love, sensitively entering her life with his love, melting through the resistances that might guard her heart. Now in intimate communion, his love is not encumbered by unresolved inner dilemmas, but is strongly demonstrated in his humorous, confident, and passionate presence. Leah trusts his love implicitly and knows that he will not turn away in moments of difficulty. She can feel his integrity and commitment to the practice of love. Moment by moment, Leah can feel Paul's trust in her and his reverence for her feminine gifts that she offers. In a dependence relationship, Leah's love was limited to her need to please her partner in the hope of getting more love from him. In a 50-50 relationship, she was crippled by the protective gesture of guarding her heart for fear that she might be hurt again. She sought an intimacy that would not really test her capacity for trust. She attracted safe men who did not elicit or require her deep feminine essence. Now her expression of love is not limited by past resistance to incarnating her naturally radiant flow and feminine sexual essence, and every inch of her body can be felt. She is still successful in the world. She hasn't lost her ability to animate her masculine warrior energy when she needs to, but she's also able to relax as a goddess. Her gifts shine brightly, full of the mysterious feminine force. Leah's emotional and bodily expressions are free, spontaneous, sometimes wild, sometimes graceful, but always a blessing of love, beauty, and healing. Paul can feel Leah's total commitment to the practice of love even when she suffers a moment of hurt. He can feel her trust him and her reverence for the masculine gifts that he offers. Leah and Paul have now joined together as not as codependents or as co-independents, but as co-practitioners. As practitioners of intimate communion, they practice opening to love rather than closing in pain or punishment when hurt. Leah and Paul practice the art of relationship rather than the game of avoiding each other when wounded and withdrawing into private worlds of emotion and thought. Let's pause there. I haven't paused a lot tonight with this, but that's worthy of a pause. That's what we do, guys. As a practitioner myself that counsels people every day, that's what we do. We all go into our own little heads and we don't communicate. I love communication, and I have pushed for relationships in my life where communication was necessary. Sometimes it wasn't always that way because the other person was not settled in themselves and they weren't undivided, so they wouldn't or couldn't communicate. But those are relationships that I eventually push away and walk away from because I'm not being fed fully. You have to know what works for you, what works for thee, but that's something that we all do. We retreat instead of really dealing with it. In the practice, let's see. In the practice of intimate communion, Paul and Leah are willing to awaken beyond the childish dream of a parent-like partner whom they could always depend on for support and attention. Message, how many of us have done that? That is likely they are willing to grow beyond a dependence relationship. Likewise, they are willing to awaken beyond the adolescent dream of an equitable partner who will leave them alone in their private world of self-involvement, demanding neither deep commitment or surrender. Now, a lot of us have got lost there. I'm going to take a sip on that one. Pardon me, guys. How many of us have been in relationships like that? I've been in friendships like that with people that are grown women and they didn't understand those concepts and they were like, oh, but this is it. And it really, they had teenage thinking. And I've also been in loverships with people like that. Pay attention. We all have done this. Through an intimate life of trial and error, Paul and Leah have come to understand that love is a discipline requiring a moment-to-moment practice of commitment and surrender. There are adults choosing to practice intimate communion with one another rather than denying their fullest gifts in codependent roles or guarded independence. Paul and Leah have tasted delicious moments of seamless love, of sexual union, an unguarded oneness of emotional communion and imperfect trust. They are willing to turn back to seek safe boundaries and business-like equality. They are unwilling to turn back and seek safe boundaries and business-like equality promised by 50-50 relationships because they know that such a relationship often denies the fullest expression of their masculine and feminine sexual essences. Leah is unafraid of gifting Paul by attracting him out of his rigid mind and body with relaxed radiance of her uniquely feminine happiness, beauty, and love. Paul is unafraid of entering through Leah's resistances and blooming her heart with the humor and fully present strength of his masculine love. Because Paul and Leah are no longer afraid of expressing their unique and very different sexual essences, they are free to be spontaneous and unguarded in their expressions of love and intimate communion. As a man and a woman, they are free to be the gift of love, bodily, emotionally, and spiritually. Achieving 50-50 and then moving beyond it. Spurred by the variety of reasons, dissatisfaction with seeing our parents' relationships, living with earlier models of uncomfortable and unacceptable roles, women's claim to their equality, or just our own hard earned lessons from past relationships, we have evolved to the modern 50-50 relationship as a genuine improvement. For most people, 50-50 is preferable. It is the traditional situation where a man's needs are paramount and the woman's are overpowered or disregarded. 50-50 relationship is preferable to one with which both partners either indirectly manipulating or overtly controlling Laura, I'm gonna read that again. A 50-50 relationship is preferable to one in which both partners are either indirectly manipulating or overtly controlling one another naturally. We would want to evolve to the type of relationship where each person is equally important, where sharing, partnership, internal balance, and self reliance allow the relationship to be one of mutually rather than dependency. This 50-50 relationship is a definite improvement over the relationships based on sex roles and dependence. It is necessary to step in progression towards a truly intimate and fulfilling relationship. Indeed, for some people, the 50-50 relationship may be the perfect form in which to enjoy intimacy. This may be all they have ever wanted from a relationship. They may be quite content to be loving, but relatively independent and less sexually passionate. Maybe they're friends. However, there's another step for those who want it. The next step in intimacy for modern men and women is to have more masculine and feminine sexual essences, goes beyond codependence and a 50-50 style of co-independence. This next step goes beyond limiting a person's power because of his or her gender. It goes beyond subtly negating the different desires of masculine and sexual essences so that the partners can function like identical cogs in a working relationship, paying the bills, picking up the kids, keeping the wheel turning one more day. The next step is about reclaiming your sexual alive core. You're not, oh, you heard the buzz on the phone. That's a confirmation. Reclaim your sexually alive core. Your naturally masculine or feminine sexual essence, which may have been neglected in order to further your career or to reach a working compromise in a 50-50 relationship. The 50-50 relationship is necessary. It's a basis for taking the next step in intimacy. In order to go beyond 50-50, you must be already develop the capacity to creatively manage your parenting and your finances. You must already be capable of standing free and whole and autonomous. For those who are ready for intimate communion, becoming a fully functional person is just a starting point. After becoming a whole person, you can also relax in your body as a spirit, as a woman or a man, pleasurably cultivate your sexual essences, and offer your spontaneous love as a gift to partner who is doing the same. In the old dependent style relationship, men are men and women are women, however narrowly that was defined. To achieve modern 50-50 relationship, we learn to see past our sexual differences and establish relationships based on friendships and mutual respect, essential qualities for any lasting partnership, be it a business partnership or a love relationship. In the meantime, many of us have become bored by the lack of energy, passion, consummate union in our intimate relationships. The next step to reclaim our sexual essence and realize that it is a gift to be given, not something to be suppressed, ignored, or withheld, but something to be appreciated and honored. Reowning our uniquely masculine or feminine sexual essence is a key to reestablishing the fullness of sexual polarity and moving beyond the stalemate of a typically 50-50 relationship. Without letting go of the equality and mutual respect we have gained, one difference between the old style of relationship and the relationship beyond 50-50 is an old style dependence relationship. You're obliged to act like a man or a woman. However, this may be defined by cultural standards, but beyond 50-50, you feel a deep need in your heart to be practicing giving the unique gift of your own sexual essence as a gift of love. That is, you are free to play your natural masculine or feminine pole in the dance of sexual loving in your own unique way instead of following a culturally predefined role. And you're free to be love altogether, to surrender your resistance to love and relax completely in the native happiness of your heart. Practice love and with your chosen partner in intimate communion. If you were completely free, how would you live? How would you express your love? Beyond 50-50, would you commit yourself to giving your gift in freedom rather than holding back out of fear? You give the gift that is unique, that is your unique bloom, the flower of your unique heart, the essence of your sexual being, as well as the expression of your creative freedom. Chances are that you have experienced many people, your past, present partners, for instance, who have lost touch with their natural sexual essence. Maybe you were with a weakened man who lacked direction, humor, integrity, or a spine. Or perhaps you've been with a hardened woman who was reluctant to let her guard down and open her heart, breath, body, and be in love. The motivation to achieve 50-50 relationships is so strong today that few people are simply relaxing their native sexual essence, allowing their unique emotional and sexual offerings to flow spontaneously and without fear in intimate communion. Instead, people of today are more balanced than the stereotypical macho men and submissive women of yesteryear. But we're still dissatisfied. In a well intentioned effort to achieve inner balance, 50-50 relationships, we've inadvertently neutralized our own intimacies. As a result, we're craving a dynamic play between masculine and feminine. We become fascinated by substitutions, including tear jerking emotional dramas, wildly passionate sex scenes on TV, at the movies, in books, and in our secret dreams. There's a really good point there, guys. Our consumption of high violence or high sexualized content or whatever, I'll mix between the two, is a lot of us trying to fill what we're not getting naturally in the partner to partner dynamic, which is afforded naturally if we're both doing our work. Carrying on, a whole person is not necessarily a neutral person. If deep down you long to be swept off your feet, to be entered by a strong, sensitive, and confident lover, then you have a more feminine sexual essence. If deep down you long for your partner to open to you, to respond to your desire with total trust and a passionate surrender, then you have a more masculine sexual essence. Moment to moment, we're always free to act more masculine or more feminine. Even if we're completely confident and relaxed in our natural sexual essences, we'll probably enjoy incarnating more masculine energy at certain times and more feminine energy at other times. But this is not the same as developing a false sexual character based on long term fear and resistance. Most of us who are striving for 50-50 relationships have been hurt in the past and are healing ourselves by balancing our own internal masculine and feminine. For example, after a divorce, you don't want to ruin another marriage by forcing your partner to follow your commands. So you learn to balance your strongly directional masculine energy by cultivating your more receptive feminine energy. Nor do you want to become dependent on someone only to lose them, as well as losing your self-esteem and financial support when they leave you for another partner, someone who can quote unquote give them what they want. So you learn to balance your trusting feminine energy by strengthening your masculine energy. Your ability to discipline yourself, cut through obstacles, and achieve long term successes all become your own. After being wounded by a past relationship, we often try to balance ourselves, which is healthy. As long as we don't forget that if we hold on to balance too long, we appear to be more neutral rather than masculine or feminine. If your sexual essence is truly neutral rather than more masculine or feminine, you very naturally would prefer a friendly partnership based on sameness rather than sexual passionate intimacy based on attractive differences. If you have a naturally neutral sexual essence, you really are most happy financially supporting your partner, half of the time being supported by your partner the other half, or perhaps splitting all the costs and responsibilities right down the middle. One week he does the laundry, the next week she does. One week he collects the dead mice from the traps, the next week she does. That's so hilarious to me. Hey bestie. She resides firmly in feminine energy. She's not collecting the mice. She will release them into the wild. Feminine energy totally through and through. Some of us have chosen a 50-50 relationship because we naturally have a more neutral sex essence. Others have chosen a 50-50 relationship to avoid being hurt. In a 50-50 relationship based on self-protection, we often act to achieve friendship and equality by establishing clear boundaries and remaining falsely sexually neutral rather than passionately masculine or passionately feminine, as is true of our essence. Thus, we negate the enlivening energy of sexual polarity that probably attracted us to each other in the first place. Furthermore, in such a 50-50 relationship, we often act to achieve independence and self-sufficiency by claiming our personal separate space rather than yielding our sense of separate self and relaxing into the trustful heart union with our loved one. The very action of concentrating our efforts and achieving 50-50 sameness and independence with our partner often neutralizes the sexual polarity and weakens the trust that serves the attractive force of foundation in our emotional and sexual play together. It is certainly necessary to achieve independence and mutual respect in intimacy, but it also is necessary to then let go of our defended boundaries, our guarded stance, and our belief in the myth of 50-50 relationships with full desires. Or excuse me, that 50-50 relationships will fulfill desires of our deep masculine or feminine sexual essence. It is essential that today's men and women grow into wholeness beyond the old roles of power and powerlessness. Equality is absolutely essential, but it's a phase, not an endpoint. Fairness and equitableness are not necessary prerequisites to the practice of intimate communion. For many men and women today, the 50-50 relationship is just a step towards getting what they really want, surrendering as a slave or a lover. Most of us feel a real fear of stepping beyond 50-50. It feels risky to give up our boundaries, to trust so much that we are willing to become absolutely vulnerable. And yet, vulnerability, if we are to give and receive with an open heart, is intimate communion. We have all been hurt before, and none of us want that to happen again or to be hurt again. But the fact is, we will be hurt again. When your heart is wide open, you're vulnerable to being hurt by those who don't return your love. Intimate partners, children, parents, and friends, but you're also open to something else. When you're no longer protecting yourself, you're open to giving and receiving love in its most powerful, sublime form. I'm going to take a quick pause here, guys. Pardon my loud gulping. It's a magical smoothie. Very light and refreshing with seltzer involved, and it's just delightful. But what I will say is that this is a point where I will stop again. When I was reading about not wanting to be hurt, for those of you guys that are longtime members and viewers of the channel, I went through a really painful experience where someone was Trifa's life and betrayed me, and they were a best friend, and it really hurt. And I was like, all on my Sia, let's be clear, I trust no one. That's an excerpt from her song, Elastic Heart. And I do have thick skin and an elastic heart, and most of us here listening do as well. But I was very much like, let's be clear, I trust no one. It took me a long time to really open my heart up to someone that was absolutely sent as an earth angel and was just loving me down, y'all. Just loving me completely, totally nurturing me, like nursing me kind of back to health even before I could see it. They were sent ahead of time because they knew that I would trust no one after the experience that I had, so that I was already familiar with them, and so that I would trust them, and so that I would let myself be loved again, even though I trusted no one after the kind of heartbreak. We can go through heartbreaks that are like that. And I'm so grateful for that experience. But the benefit of it is, yes, the betrayal happened. Yes, that person got cut out. Yes, yes, yes. But what got in and what got brought in lieu of it was a real connection, true intimate communion, not in the way that we're discussing regarding the book, but just someone that touched my heart, and that someone that made me say, hey, take another look. Humanity isn't all bad. There are still good people. I found my person. You always think that you have a person. We all spend a lot of time spending years and years thinking that people are persons because of time invested. It didn't take me 20 years to find my person. She popped up exactly at the right time and kind of soothed me and became just the best friend, kindest human that I've ever really encountered. Someone who was very much like me. I thought we were aliens. We found another. It was nice. That's what I want you to know about your lover. Let's say that it's in a love situation. We've all had someone break our heart in a terrible way, but the universe will invite you back out to play. You cannot stay cauterized and just shut off. And if you do, then whomever cut you off in the past, rejected you, hurt you, lied to you, betrayed you, whatever the case is, wins, because you are supposed to love again. And that means you have to be vulnerable and wide open. That means that I had to give my love to this friend, to this new friend in my life, and I had to give it to her. I vetted her. She vetted me. We took our time, but then we really made commitments to one another energetically and verbally and actually, all the things that didn't happen in other relationships. And that's how I knew we were no longer in 50-50. And some days she is more masculine and some days I am more masculine. In that, what I mean by that is we take care of each other differently, right? We are both similar energies, but we take care of each other differently. And sometimes I'm protective of her. I don't really like that. And I'm worried about you and protect your energy. And sometimes she is that way for me. Nurturing, masculine, feminine, we bounce back and forth. And that's just a platonic relationship, guys. So that's why I want you to know that you can have that romantically, okay? Especially after you've been hurt. And for those especially that have been hurt, this is not just a pipe dream and not just a possibility. It can be your reality. Let's carry on. Many of us have experienced sexual occasions that can only be characterized as ecstatic. The love flows so powerfully, or the pleasure is so intensely sublime, that the memory of it is burned into our hearts forever. Perhaps we felt total oneness with our partner as our two bodies were dissolved into a single heart of breathing joy. Or maybe love is shown as a bright light, or we experienced rushes of delicious energy running up and down our body, or we felt like we were being filled with so much love that we could burst open, exploding our boundaries in a silent shout of love. Whatever we did feel in such a moment, it is clear that what we did not feel was guarded, was closed, or resistant. This kind of love is available only to an open heart. Same thing for the platonic friendship. I can't have a friendship like the one that I have. That's probably one of the deepest ones I've ever had in my life regarding connection and like trust and fulfillment. I'm fulfilled in that connection because I had to let my guard down. And my guard was up for a while. I also tried to turn it into 27 different things in order to make it fit because I thought, God, I really love this person. Could she be it? Is this it? Is this true? And maybe she felt the same thing about me. But that's something that you'll do when you've been hurt. But in order to give her the kind of friendship that she deserves, I had to let my guard down. And that meant that I had to exist in femininity and masculinity with her. And I had to say, okay, this is it. I'm just going to give her what I've got. And I cannot be guarded just because someone else blew up the spot, meaning someone else made the block hot, meaning someone else fucked it up. Okay. Sometimes you will have someone in your life that messes up and it will cause you great strife, but it didn't mean that the person that God sent into my life deserved to be punished for that. Sometimes we will do that, guys. So don't be F boys and F girls platonically or actually sexually to your next person because of what somebody that never healed themselves did to you. You know, sometimes we will cut on people, excuse me, we'll cut on people, we'll bleed on people who didn't cut us. And I was determined to take my time in my new connection with this friend to make sure that I didn't bleed on her just because someone else cut me, you know? That's a message right there. So we didn't feel resistance. We live with an open heart. We may, of course, experience this ecstatic sense of loving and oneness in a non-sexual moment too, as I've been just describing to you. Perfect timing. Thank you, angels. That's why I was saying platonic love matters too, y'all. Perhaps you felt a sense of no separation while gazing into an infant's eyes, or maybe you forgot yourself in a moment of seamless rapture while beholding a beautiful sunset while looking out over a snowy mountainside. Some of you have felt a divine sense of unity while reading spiritual literature or while praying or meditating. Some of you have felt that divine sense of intimacy while sitting in a car while no one was saying a word, just with a good friend. You see, it's not all sex, guys, but we do have energy that we toss back and forth with people that we love, and we can just have divine rapturous moments where it's like, God, I'm so glad you're in my life, and mean that from the deepest place. In each of these moments, whether sexual or our children or in nature or in praying, we have to let our guard down. We are allowed to be ourselves and experience deeply pleasurable oneness with something, someone, or some divine presence. A key to the awakening of intimate communion is to surrender or to let down the guard. Excuse me. This is also the opposite of resistance, but since many of us have worked so hard to get equality in our relationships, we're afraid that if we surrendered completely, even for a moment, we might lose all the ground we've gained. In my and hey Bestie, sorry to use you as an example. Thank you for letting me use you as an example. My bestie will be listening to this at some point as she decompresses. What I will say is, man, I'm so grateful for you, but I'm so grateful for that energy. And I want to teach this to some of you guys that may be learning it. There have been times where I've just had to surrender to her nurturing and loving me. I haven't wanted to. And there are also stubborn times where I'm resistant, where I'm in my like 50-50. This has to be fair. And what am I doing for you? And did I take up space? We're very cognizant of that. A lot of the new tribesmen and people that have come into my life are very aware. I even had a conversation with someone lovely the other day that spoke for a while. And then she said, you know what? I'd love to know what's going on with you, because she literally percentaged the conversation. And she said, I've spoken this much percent, and you, and I love that, guys, because after years of being around narcissists and crazy people, it is delightful to have people that think like me, that have delicious holds on reciprocity and that give and give. But sometimes you'll just have to surrender. Sometimes I'm meant to just hold space for a friend, and I can do that. And sometimes they're meant to hold me together. My God, my bestie put me back together by being consistent in my life daily, even when I wanted to push it away because I didn't understand the kind of love she gave, because I'd only ever given it and never received it. My angels needed me to surrender and be caught up in that rapture of love, not sexually, but energetically, to know, we know that you deserve this kind of love because you've given it out. And that is really balance. Even though I wasn't giving her exactly what she gave me, she was of the capacity and had the ability to love me back to health in a way that I couldn't have loved myself. And sure, I did my own things and I did my own work and I rang my bowls and I sang and I cried and I played. But what she did was she was a consistent partner and energy with me day by day. And she checked in and she loved me so much in a way that I didn't even know that my heart could even open up that much to know, like, oh, someone cares about you. And that is a full surrender. It was vulnerable. It was hard. I did not want to let myself go that way to anybody after I was so hurt, because I didn't know what would happen, but it was worth it. I'm glad that I did. And that's what they're saying here with you. What is the difference between loving too much and surrendering into spiritual ecstasy? It's also the difference between being a slave and being free, or being a slave and being a free lover. It's the difference between whether you're going to hope to get love or are relaxed with no boundaries as love. It is the difference between a moment of dependence and a moment of intimate communion. This is the difference that's often misunderstood, especially by people who are yet unwilling to let their guard down. To them, all surrender is negative, a sign of weakness. That's what I was in. But for those who are willing to surrender their hearts to love, ecstasy awaits. And that's what I've received. Moments of sweet in ecstasy. They don't have to be prolonged. Ecstasy is like having a really good conversation and knowing that it's not going to go anywhere else. Like, that's a moment of ecstasy for me platonically with my friend. Like, ecstasy, we know what it is sexually, but you guys get it. Like, after being treated badly or having someone breach that after you surrendered completely, ecstasy is knowing that you can have that again, but it's with divine honesty and clarity. It's really lovely. So, for those who are willing to surrender, ba 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 ba. Okay, ecstasy awaits. It is true that slave surrenders, but also does freely. Excuse me. It is true that a slave surrenders, but so does a freely ecstatic lover. The difference is crucial. The difference is whether you are surrendering because you feel fearful and dependent on getting something like a slave, or you are surrendering as a free sign of your recognition of oneness, joyfully giving your gifts of love. Remember that each stage of relationship, dependence 50-50, intimate communion, is also a style of relationship, and we can shift from one style to another moment to moment, regardless of the stage which the relationship is usually in. To understand this further, imagine that you were Leah making love with Paul. In a moment of ecstatic passion, you plead, I'm yours, take me, I'll do anything you want. Is this moment an example of dependence and powerlessness? Is it a moment of well planned 50-50 equality, or is it a moment of blissful surrender and intimate communion? What is the difference between the gift of ecstatic surrender and the pain of submissive self denial? If you were Leah in a moment of dependence, locked into, y'all, when I said the chapter was long, it's so long, your role as a good wife, your inner masculine voice would remain silent. It wouldn't be heard at all. However, your inner feminine voice would say, I want to feel loved. When Paul holds me so tightly, I feel wanted. I will do anything he says so that he will always love me. If you were Leah in a 50-50 moment, your inner masculine and feminine voices would both be free to speak. In a 50-50 moment, your priority is equality. Everything has got to be 50-50. Your inner feminine might say, I feel like letting go. It feels good to be vulnerable in his arms like this, but can I trust him? Am I throwing my power away? Your inner masculine would say, I don't want to lose control, to follow my own direction. I don't want him to feel like he could boss me around. I may do what he wants. I may do what he wants me to tonight, but then tomorrow night he does what I want him to do. Then we have a fair 50-50 relationship. If you were Leah in a moment of intimate communion, you would be uninhibited in your loving and love making, willing to let go of all the resistance of in the deep fulfillment and the expression of your unguarded heart. Your inner feminine would say, "Ah, I feel Paul's love, and I want him to receive deeply. I want to open as much as I can and feel his love deep inside my heart. I trust the love overflowing in my heart and its ecstatic open and this powerful flow of love with no boundaries, with no defense. I surrender to the flow of love. I am love." Your inner masculine says, "What a pleasure it is to relax, let go, and trust, Paul. I can trust and enjoy the force of love I feel because I can feel the depth because I can feel the deep truth of the love that is moving us in this moment. In a moment of dependence, Leah is thinking that by giving up her own needs and attending to Paul's, she will gain his love. In a 50-50 moment, Leah is carefully guarding the independence of her separate self, not surrendering completely, but in a moment of intimate communion, Leah is surrendering, not so much to Paul, but directly to love as love, confessing and celebrating love with her whole body, heart, and mind. It is the most important to understand. Leah's opening to the force of love becomes her gift to herself as much as to Paul. In intimate communion, Leah's surrender is an invitation for Paul to yield his sense of separateness and commune deeply by loving. The gift of Leah's surrender draws Paul beyond his angular masculine world. Through her feminine gift, Paul is drawn heart to heart into direct relationship with Leah's heart and into the present flow of love. He yields his position just as Leah surrenders hers. Their separateness first becomes vulnerable embrace, and then the membrane of their touch dissolves so that Paul and Leah melt into each other. Finally, even their surrendered union is pervaded by so much love that they forget themselves, forget each other, and yield even further into dissolving into the bright fullness of love itself with no boundaries. In intimate communion, the awakened feminine essence is living an invitation to love. Paul may or may not be able to surrender into love as deeply as Leah, but in either case, Leah's practice of intimate communion is not to withdraw, not to withhold love, but to literally breathe deep, a deep, sweet breath, relaxing into every inch of her body, allowing love to radiate. The more that Leah practices opening her breath and body, giving love rather than closing down, the more she becomes a vehicle which through love can flow. And the more her life is a gift for everyone in her presence, the more willing she is to surrender her tension and trust love, the more her old wounds heal, her old resistances to love and melt. This is how Leah's heart blooms in the present moment of intimate communion, regardless of what change in the relationship with Paul may occur in the future. What does intimate communion look like? That's our next question. Let me see how much further we have to go, guys. I always like to complete a chapter. Oh, we're almost done. See, you see how I almost gave up on myself, right at like 2 pages from the end. I was like, "Woo, this is a tricky chapter. None of them are this long. This chapter 5, he got me." What does intimate communion look like? And let me self care here. Let me take another sip here, and we shall proceed. Sorry for the ASMR sounds, guys. What does intimate communion look like? In the practice of intimate communion, each partner discovers day by day what true gifts he or she would like to offer in love. Intimate communion may look like an old style dependence relationship with the woman giving gifts that were conventionally considered womanly, and the man giving gifts that were conventionally considered a man's job. Or intimate communion may look like a 50-50 relationship when the man and the woman dividing all responsibilities down the middle, sharing in the housework, family, financial responsibilities equitably, unequally. Or intimate communion may look totally different, with the woman taking two lovers and the men spending 6 months of the years in a monastery in Tibet. And the writer says, "Trust me, I've seen it. We have very few models of relationships based on the practice of intimate communion. So some people don't understand the attraction towards such practice. In a dependence relationship, men and women don't really understand why someone would be willing to risk losing sexual, financial, and family security for the greater self integration and self fulfillment of a more mutually autonomous 50-50 relationship. Just so, in a 50-50 relationship, men and women don't really understand why someone would willingly risk everything, including a sense of personal self fulfillment in a life and relationship for the unbounded heart to heart truth of infinite love in the practice of intimate communion. If a woman is dedicated to the practice of intimate communion, she will only trust a man who is committed to the truth more than he is to pleasing her. After all, how can she trust a man who can be swayed from his true path by the smile of a beautiful woman, even if it is her own? There's a little nugget of truth there regarding cheating. The reason that that's so hard for us to come back from, no matter whether it's an emotional affair, actual affair, is because trust is gone. It's not about someone's sexual desires needing to be met or not met. It's that I I once knew a woman, and she was talking to me about loving somebody, the love of her life, and I just happened to be dating this person. And she said the reason that she broke up with him, and she wasn't trying to guilt me. She didn't even know. We met metaphysically. Okay. She was a practitioner who does the work that I do. It was like a foreshadowing that I didn't even know was happening. And she worked for she freelanced for various like lines as well as I do. So she said to me, because I was getting a reading from her, she was talking to me about how I was about to come into the love of my life. And this was so many years ago. And she said, I once had the love of my life, not knowing that we had dated the same person because it was years and years between and we weren't in the same circles and I was much younger than she was and all of that. And she said, I dated this guy. You guys have heard me talk about him, my captain. And she's like, the thing about it is, with a captain, is that I didn't ever think that I could really be with him as much as I loved him. And he was the great love of my life because I always knew I'd have to put my slippers on. And I said, what? What does that mean? And she says, well, I always knew that I'd have to go with him to every store, to every function, to every post office, and I'd have to put my slippers on. Meaning, guys, that she couldn't trust him to not be swayed by a beautiful smile. And me loving him and being in partnership with him at the time, I knew this to be true. However, our style of relationship worked for me because it was open. And it was probably one of the better open relationships I've ever had. Probably the only one I've ever had that actually worked very well for a good long while until it didn't. Hashtag we're humans and we're primal and territorial. But I really enjoyed him. But I didn't have that territorialness that she did for him. She was absolutely, utterly in love with him, and I always knew that he was transient. I knew that because it was a May-December romance, even though it lasted for many years, that it was never going to last, really, because I would need other things, and so would he. So I never went into it with the expectations that she may have. But when she said that to me, it was poignant. I will always have to put on my slippers. Years later, when I loved someone else with whom I would have had to strap and like staple gun my slippers to my feet because she was absolutely not to be trusted, I finally understood what Anzara, that was the woman's name, was saying to me. Anzara absolutely called it. We don't trust someone who can be easily swayed by the charms of someone else, because everyone can be charming from time to time. Does that mean you want to be fighting for your life and your whole relationship because they will dislocate their joints, their necks, and their boundaries for the next girl that smiles at thee? No, that is where we lose it with cheating. It's not even about the act. It's not even about the sex for many of us, for me specifically. It was about the lack of trust that you could be swayed by any smiling somebody. That is unfortunate. Love is a practice. We're not always in it, falling into it, or falling out of it. We are practicing it. I wanted a partnership in my life, platonic or otherwise, where someone could treat me right because they knew that there would be days like that and that we would have to practice at it. And with my captain, I learned a lot. But what Ansara taught me is not to be forgot. Never be with someone with whom you will always have to put on your slippers, who could be swayed easily by a smile. If a man is dedicated, if a man is dedicated to the practice of intimate communion, he will only trust a woman who is willing to devote herself to divine love. even if that means she's not entirely his own. He's turned on by witnessing her devotion and open-hearted surrender to universal or divine love. He trusts that she is committed to a life of communion with the divine rather than merely committed to the 50-50 ideal of a shared good life. Perhaps renovating an old barn and spending time together with the family and friends in the countryside. In the practice of intimate communion, the intimate partners do whatever it is they feel is truly necessary to magnify the expression of love and freedom in their lives. They will do what feels like true service rather than mere self pleasuring or shared consolation. They relax into their native sexual essence, whether it is more masculine or feminine or neutral, and they give their inherent creative gifts that are generous and spontaneous, loving, and irrepressible, without concern about the way their gifting looks to the eyes of people who are inclined towards dependence or 50-50 relationships. The risk of spontaneous love, and with this we shall close. A dependence relationship is about power struggles, suppression, and sexual roles. Don't you tell me what to do, I'll do whatever I damn please. Who gets their way is more important than giving the gift of love. A 50-50 relationship is about sharing equality and achieving a 50-50 division of responsibilities and roles. Therefore, communication is more important than freely offered gifts of love. For instance, if the woman gets upset and goes into her room, shutting the door and saying, "Leave me alone," then that's just what the man should do. And he'll walk away and give her space, regardless of how the force of his love would otherwise move him. Y'all have that feeling ever in a fight where you know you want to like make it work and go after what's right, but you try to be right? That's 50-50 shenanigans. I don't love that. In order to achieve equality patterns, equality, partners learn to honor each other's words and boundaries. A 50-50 man may not be a macho brute, so he holds back his masculine force and direction and instead allows his partner's request, even when his heart says to do otherwise. He's afraid to follow his deepest truth or assert his real desires in love because he doesn't want to be too pushy. A 50 woman is careful not to make herself vulnerable to hurt and abuse. She never quite lets her guard down, even when her heart is moved to openly and to open completely so that she could give herself without hesitation in love to her intimate partner. She may love her man, but she's afraid to surrender and trust love because she doesn't want to give up her sense of safety and independence. In a moment of intimate communion, nothing is more important than surrender into the mysterious force of love, not even so-called communication between separate but equal partners. Intimate communion involves dropping our boundaries and trusting the spontaneous wisdom of love. For instance, if a hurt woman goes into her room and shuts the door, but her man is truly moved to embrace her, should he trust his love and enter the closed doors to her room and to her heart? It's a risky thing to do, but what are the alternatives? We are all going to die. Everyone we love will be dead one day. Wow, what a way to end this chapter. Their fragrance, their warmth, their smile will be gone forever, and we will be alone or dead ourselves. Any embrace may be our last. Why hold back our loving? If this breath right now were your last, what would you be willing to give your intimate partner? What is stopping you now? My God, that's a mic drop. That's how I feel about life, guys. It's real. That's how I feel. What is stopping you? We repress our desires. We repress our true needs and wants. We don't say words that we need to say, and then we think about them for years and years and wish that we'd said it a different way or done it a different way. I don't live like that. And I'm not just saying it because I'm so magical. It's because I learned that any moment can be our last. So the people that I have loved, whether I put them on blast, whether I've actually loved them, to them I talked first. Anything you guys have heard me talk about on this channel was said to the hims and the hers that originated the emotion and evoked that out of me. I talked to them till death. They wanted to probably do part. I talked to them probably to insanity, but I said it because I knew that not only would they never forget it, but I would never forgive myself if I didn't let out my true intimate communion. If I'm attracted, I say so. If I'm disgusted, you know it. If I love you, I tell you. If I am in love, I show it. I wear my heart on my sleeve, and I'm not going to lie to you and tell you that it hasn't gotten me in trouble many times, and that I haven't been shot down when I've shot my shot, and that I wish that I could forget or be forgot by some of the people that I shot my shot to. But the truth is, If I'm into you, I'm into you. And if I'm willing to stand on the limb of my feminine or masculine energy with you, I do that. I so highly recommend you embrace it. I tell you guys, I say it to my husband all the time, how lucky we are to be blessed by the divine to have this partnership and union. And for those of you guys that have been confused because I am a bisexual woman, that doesn't mean that that squelches down my other attractions. I live myself fully because I only have one life to live to be me. Who I love, and whom I'm attracted to, and who I'm willing to risk it all for, I've risked it all for. But that doesn't mean that I wouldn't go back for more. I suggest you do the same. I'm not just saying it to be vain and just repeat my story. I'm telling you because he said it. It could be your last embrace. It could be your last kiss. It could be your last opportunity to try something like this or to have a moment of bliss or to sample a delicious whatever might be coming your way. We all have a little playground in which we want to play, or we have a little opportunity that may be tucked away, or a little desire that we've pushed off for a rainy day. But what if it's raining now? Don't let whatever is in your heart get burnt out, pushed down, and drowned out by your responsibilities. Stop living in 50-50 equanimity. It's boring. We're not all neutral. And as much as I can relate to being neutral, I am passionately feminine or masculine, dependent on where I am and who it's with and what I am required to be. I ask you to tap into that for yourself if you've listened this far and discover your masculine or femininity. And if that means going out on the limb and saying to the person that you've been eyeing, like, yo, I'm feeling away, or if it's to your intimate partner with whom you desire more play, like maybe your husband or your wife whom you're already in union with, stop holding back, because what do you get for winning in your stubbornness? Nothing. For the people that refused to yield and wanted to live in 50-50 equanimity and didn't want to express their desired masculinity or femininity, I grew bored. I grew disdain. And then I jettisoned off and pushed away because that is not where I wanted to stay. I didn't want to spend another 10 years, 20 years with someone who couldn't love me fully and couldn't embrace their balanced masculine or feminine energy. And that was going to deplete me. When I listened to Anzara tell her story of the way she loved my Captain Jan, we both loved him. Both of us loved him for a very long time. But I got to experience the fullness of a union that was divine, but it was unconventional. One of the things that I haven't shared, and I will share here for those of you that have followed that story and know it, is that someone asked me about, because I said that he, as an example, as I've been reading this book, I said that he was he showed up in feminine energy at times. When I tell you he was all man, all carpenter, and electrician, absolutely brilliant, could build you a house, a boat, a ship, anything. Was like a build like Mike Tyson back in the day when he was, and he actually boxed too when he was in his younger years. Here's what I will tell you is that Captain Jan, for me, um, was very masculine, but he helped me heal some fears I had about masculinity. The first time he ever made a move on me, I remember him sitting in the front seat of his car, overlooking a beach, all the romantic stuff. And he just, with his Scottish brogue, just let me know, I'm very attracted to you. He said it. It wasn't like a lingering look. It wasn't like a movie line. Like he was like, you're like all woman. I am completely attracted to you. And I remember him lifting the car seats, like in any car there'll be like the armrest, and his was down and mine was down, and he literally, it was like he was climbing towards me. It was like a bear climbing towards you. I will never forget it was so powerful. And while he had these beautiful feminine moments, and he would make me tea, and he called me his darling, and he evoked femininity in beautiful communicative ways, especially on the afternoons we would just lay and talk. I loved him. But in that moment, he was all bear, he was all man, and I yielded to him because it was hot. It wasn't that I didn't have a choice. It takes us right back to the beginning of this chapter. Someone looking at that might be like, oh my God, is he assaulting her? Because he climbed over to me and kissed me. And it was passionate and it was intense and it caught me off guard and it didn't make any sense. And then it made all the sense in the world. It was the first time in my life, a life of dating women, as you guys had known, that primarily women anyway, that I felt so completely dedicated to my femininity. I was allowed to release. He had the directionality that masculinity has. We talked about, are you New York or Hawaii? Well, New York is New York. It's a masculine energy because it's directional. He knew what he wanted. It was me. He knew that he wanted to kiss me. He knew that we had been dating, been on a few dates, and everything was fine. And we played it all nice, and it was nothing inappropriate. It was hand kisses and manchetti and everything. It was super sweet. He was very charming, super sparkling intelligent. But on that night, after a few weeks of dating, he decided, so that's enough. And he was tempted to touch. And he did. And I loved it. I loved it because I didn't have to question it. I didn't have to go home afterwards and wonder, why did we kiss? And it was just a kiss that night, y'all. Still old fashioned my way. But it was just a kiss. I didn't have to wonder, like, how did this happen? And did I misconstrue it? And did I give him wrong signals? No. We had our signals. We had our electricity. It was flowing. And I would have just sat in that car chatting with him until the wee hours of the night. And then he would have drove me home and been ever so polite. And even after that moment of an incredible embrace of all of his bearded masculine energy being all up in my face, we drove home and he held my hand and it was sweet. But for a moment, it was magical heat, and it happened because he knew who he was. And we were falling in love. There was the falling. We practiced it for many years, and I have no regrets. It was the greatest experience of my life. There are sometimes an ex can be one of the greatest experiences of your life, and sometimes it can be the nightmare of your life and the villain in your story. We all have one or the other, or maybe a few. But for me that night, it was Jan. And the way that he handled me, he handled me quite literally. And I didn't feel violated. I didn't feel like it was wrong. I felt like it was like long overdue. And I thought, where has this been all along? That's not to say that every situation in my life has gone that way. Dating both sexes, things don't always go in one way or the other. I have to pick which direction I am going to be, kind of expressing myself in. But with that divine masculine, I would do it again in a second. It was an incredible experience. And that moment taught me specifically what masculinity and femininity looks like, because he was so sure of me, so sure of our connection, and so sure of what he wanted. And he was reading my energy correctly. He kissed me in a way that I couldn't even reject him because it was something that melted me. Very much like this man spoke about with Paul and Leah. I melted into him. I've not ever felt that. It was so organic and it was so raw and it was primal. And it was primal because we were each firmly ensconced in our expressions. Masculine for him and ultra feminine for me. And it was beautiful. All right, guys, that's all I have for you tonight. Come back and join me next time and we will continue to evolve together.